Hi YouTube, Brandon and Moonstone here. A couple videos ago I mentioned that I am coming out of a depression. Sucks when it happens, relief when it's done. Learned a few things along the way. Over time I'm learning to handle them better so that I am also able to bring myself out of them faster. My spiritual work in the last couple of years has helped a lot in doing that. But what I wanted to talk about right now, which came up in the last couple of videos, is my body. As it relates to the world around me, such as the moon and stuff. Now, I am going to give you a warning right now. I am about to give you information that is TMI. It is too much information. I don't consider it graphic. Others might. And so if you don't like talk or feel that talk is inappropriate about lady bits, this is not the video for you. Okay? So now you've been warned. Alright. In my last video, I talked about how this upcoming blue moon, I think, might have something to do with my finally coming out of a depressive state, of one of my depressions. It might. I also don't really know what's going on astrologically at the moment. That is still a topic that greatly confuses me. I'm still working on learning more of that so that it's not so confusing to me. But that I don't know if that has anything to do with it too. Okay. Here's where I go into TMI. I am 37 years old. And all of my life after puberty hit has been a struggle in terms of reproductive and menstruation issues. Okay. I'm just going to tell you what I've got. Just trying to think of the best way to put it and explain it without going into an entire diatribe. Okay. I have a congenital birth defect called uterine didelphys. Okay. That can, in terms of how uterine didelphys can actually present physically, there's several different ways that can happen. But essentially what it is there are some ducts, D-U-C-T-S, ducts, in your, as you're forming as an embryo in your mother's womb, the point at which your reproductive organs start manifesting themselves into physical existence, they come from some ducts. I want to say Malarian. That, though, I am pulling out of my ass. That's I can't remember if that's what they're called. But they are ducts that they grow and transform and ultimately turn into your reproductive system. I can't remember if that's just in females or males too. However, that's what develops into your vagina, your urethra, your uterus, your ovaries, your fallopian tubes, how all those interconnect with each other. It also interconnects with the creation of and the manifestation of your bladders and your kidneys. Your bladders, plural. Bladder and kidneys. Now, what uterine didelphys is, simplest version, having two uteruses. Okay? Now, for those of you, particularly men, if you're still here, who may not know how the reproductive system of a woman works, you usually usually have 2 ovaries. Okay, those house the eggs that mix with sperm to make the babies. And once a month, one of those ovaries, okay, is going to release 1 egg. Then that egg will, it's actually an explosion, literally an explosion will happen, and the egg is released, okay, and there's a small little netherworld, and then it goes into the fallopian tubes, travels down the fallopian tubes, where at some point, if it's going to happen, it mixes with sperm, and one little sperm guy says hi to the egg, and they make a baby, okay? And then that fertilized egg leads down into the uterus, and then the egg will embed itself into the uterine lining to start the growing process of creating a baby. Now, physically speaking, you've got the ovaries that lead to fallopian tubes that come down to your uterus, which is the womb. Then under the uterus, connected to the uterus, is the cervix, which is the sphincter-like closing of the uterus to the outside world. Then through, or the cervix, I said cervix, right? Okay. And then the cervix, on the other side of the cervix, underneath the cervix, you have the vagina, which is actually a canal, vaginal canal, that leads to the outside world. Also mixed in is your bladder and your urethra, also coming through and intermingling with everything else to create a system that eliminates waste, propagating the species. All of that sort of mixes together and works. Okay, so for me, and this actually can manifest in different ways for different women. In my particular body, I do have the 2 ovaries, okay? Currently, it is unclear whether when I ovulate, if I alternate ovaries like normal women do, or if both ovaries release an egg. That is currently unclear. So I do have, 2 ovaries that go to the fallopian tubes, and then I have 2 uteruses or uteri. Since uteruses is normally not used in the plural form, I use the term uteri to mean 2 uteruses, okay? I have 2. They are, instead of being side to side, physically they're actually front and back, okay? I have, which is actually unusual in my particular congenital defect, my uteruses are actually 2 separate and complete organs in and of themselves. A lot of people with this condition will have like a septum in one uterus, essentially creating 2 uteri, but it's actually one organ that's separated by skin tissue. That is not the case for me. For me, I have 2 individual separate uteri, 2 wombs, okay? They're front and back. One ovary comes in the fallopian tube, connects with one uterus. The other ovary connects with the fallopian tube and connects to the other uterus. Okay? Then both uteruses have a cervix. So I have actually 2 cervices. Okay? And those 2 cervices lead to 1 vaginal canal, 1 vagina, okay, with 1 urethra. All right. When I was born with this, I had 1 vagina, but it was separated vertically by a septum, by skin tissue. So while I had one canal, I had two openings. Now that septum that created the two openings actually started about halfway up. So it wasn't like, visually speaking, I look any different. Out from the outside, I don't look any different. There's one opening. I no longer have two portions of the vagina. I'll explain what I did, but that physically is where I am. So what does that mean in terms of living with it? What that means is, one, having children. Doctors didn't tell me how high a chance that I had of myself or my child dying on the table in delivery. Nobody told me. Fabulous, isn't it? Would I have changed my procreation methods or whatever? I honestly don't know. I have been pregnant 4 times. I have 2 children. One question people ask all the time when talking about the subject, it's not like it comes up a lot, is, can you get pregnant in both? Yes, I can. If I did, it would probably be a death sentence. Something would burst. I mean that literally. In my particular case, one of my uteri, one of the uteruses, that is so hard to figure out, is a little bit smaller, which means it has to stretch more to hold the baby. So there are real concerns of physical uterine rupture. Okay, so what does this all mean? First of all, if you happen somehow to stumble on this video and you have this, number one, you need to inform your doctors. You need to learn everything that you can, because your doctors will not specialize in it. You will be very lucky if your doctor has seen anybody else with it. Nobody specializes in it. There is no true, real, definitive research information out there on how this all works. That being said, however, there is noticed an increase in kidney problems. So if you are watching this and you know you have this, and your doctors have not requested an ultrasound of your kidneys, you need to request that that happens. It is very possible that you only have one kidney. It is very possible that you have tumors or cysts on your kidneys. None of this is necessarily a terrible bad thing. This does not mean you're sick. This does not mean you can't have children. However, in terms of your kidneys, you do need to know what you're dealing with so that later down the line, if there are any problems, you have information to share with a doctor. Okay? In my personal case, what this means is that I am subject to a higher percentage chance of tumors and cysts. Has that manifested? Yes. I have ovarian cysts. I have uterine cysts. I have cysts in at least one kidney. All of them are like benign cysts. None of them yet are creating a problem. Why didn't you have one removed? Well, doctors will not remove healthy tissue. Neither one of my uteri are necrotic in any way. They function. So doctors are loath to put a patient under anesthesia and the risks of anesthesia to remove something that is not necrotic. In other words, the risks outweigh the benefits. Okay. In my case, I am not sure that the risks outweigh the benefits, and I have seriously considered having a full hysterectomy, and doctors will not consider it for me. Why would I say that? Okay, let's start with the septum. I told you in my vaginal canal, about halfway up, you would hit a septum. A septum is a layer of skin, for lack of a better term, that then separated the vaginal canal the rest of the way up. Okay, so that the upper portion was actually in two separate sections. Nobody knew this. I had been on birth control, and nobody knew about when you go on. If you decide to go on birth control, you do have a female gynecological exam, because they make sure everything is going okay before they prescribe you drugs. And if that didn't happen for you, that's a problem. But because of that septum, and one side is slightly larger than the other side, the speculum only went up one side. Opens, looks at the cervix, does the cervical pap smear test, closes, comes back out. So nobody ever knew that there was another side. So there was no reason to think that there were two cervices. There was no reason to think that there was anything abnormal, okay? It wasn't until I started having problems with my period when I was 17. No, I was 18. Where I began having a lot of serious pain. Some women face more pain than others during their menstrual cycle. Mine hit at ovulation and at my actual menstruation time. Now that I've had children, I can tell you exactly what it feels like, but I went to the doctor for the pain because I noticed when I was in school that other girls who I happened to know were on their period were functioning. They might complain. They might take pain medication. They might bemoan their bloating. But they were functioning. When it would hit for me, I was writhing in pain in bed, completely non-functioning. Pain medication didn't seem to hit. And it was also happening during ovulation, not just at my period. With the ovulation, we found out what that was going on. What was happening is when I ovulate, so it doesn't happen every month this way, but a lot of times when I ovulate, that little explosion that I told you about, I hemorrhage a bit. Literally, my ovary releases more blood than normal with the egg explosion. Well, that blood then has to go somewhere, and it then reabsorbs into my abdominal wall. And it turns out that blood reabsorption is painful. Bet you didn't know that. So my pain was actually coming from the blood reabsorption, not from the egg explosion. However, they couldn't figure out what my problem was with my periods, and so they thought that perhaps I had an ovarian infection or a uterine infection. So I started a round of antibiotics, which did nothing except let me find out that I cannot take doxycycline without being physically ill and vomiting. So they started me on another round of antibiotics, and that didn't help. That didn't work either. So they finally scheduled an ultrasound. When I had the ultrasound, I'm worried. This wasn't like happy joy, oh, let's look at the baby. This was something's wrong and we need to look inside you, right? And they wouldn't tell me what was going on. Now, if you've ever had an ultrasound and something's not quite right, They don't tell you. The radiologist will not tell you what's going on or what they're seeing. Okay? Or the tech, usually. There's lots of, Seriously? And so you're like, and those noises mean? And they get all cheerful, and we're going to have the radiologist review this, and we'll be giving you a call. So then you have to wait, and you wait, and you wait. And I remember I was working at my first job out of high school. I worked prior to high school. It doesn't matter. Sidetrack. I got a call at the office, and my doctor at the time was Asian, and she had a very heavy accent, and we were talking on the phone. So she's telling me, well, you have 2 uteruses, and blah, blah, blah. And she was continuing to discuss this with me, and I was just like, I'm sorry, you're going to have to repeat yourself, you know. And so she told me. And then had some more tests, not because anything was in particularly wrong, but more so that we had a bigger picture of what was going on with me, so that I would know, you know, for the future. So yeah, we found the cysts on my kidneys, and I have those monitored. They're not causing any issues right now. I have cysts on my ovaries and on one of my uteri, and they're not causing issues right now except for extra pain. You know, I went through my sexual life having that septum in my vaginal canal, which was incredibly painful when you think about the physical act of intercourse and what happens. Well, if the man that I am with is at an incorrect angle in which he would naturally go up that slightly larger side, literally, this being me and this being him, which was very painful for both sides of the equation. I gave birth to 2 children without being told the risks I was taking. I gave vaginal birth to 2 children around that septum. Wasn't until I had already had my second child, and I had changed jobs, which meant that I had changed medical insurances, which meant that I had to change doctors, and I was due. And so I went in and I explained all the history to my new gynecologist, and for the first time I had a gynecologist who had actually heard of such a thing. And she said, well, why didn't you ever have the septum removed? Excuse me? Now, mind you, having that septum there in my vaginal canal meant painful sex. It meant not using a tampon. I'll explain why in a moment. Which not using a tampon meant no swimming. I have other issues with tampons now that aren't anything to do physically, but nobody told me that it was possible to remove the septum, ever. They let me continue having painful sex. They let me continue having children, and then birthing around a septum physically, without ever saying, hey, this is not a functioning organ. This is extra skin. You can remove that and make your life easier. Nobody told me. That makes me a little mad, but she told me, well, yeah, all we would do is remove the septum itself. No changes. There might be a little scar tissue left in the vaginal canal, but no changes would actually, your vaginal canal wouldn't have to be reconstructed. It would just remove the extra skin. And then once you healed from that, sex will probably change a great deal for you. And it was not covered by my insurance. This was considered, by the way, I have to have 2 pap smears because I have 2 cervixes. When I have insurance, I don't currently have insurance. When I have insurance, I have to pay for one of those pap smears because they will not cover the other one. My extra parts aren't covered. Anyway, so we had to come up with the money, which was almost $10,000 to have the septum removed because it was out of pocket. And I had to go to a cancer specialist. I had to go to a, what's it called? It was an oncology surgeon, a reproductive oncology surgeon. They weren't concerned about cancer or anything with me, but because of the parts that they were working on, they figured that a vaginal cancer surgeon who therefore has rebuilt women's reproductive parts and has a lot of experience with that would be the best person for the job in my particular case. And had the surgery, healed from the surgery. There is a little bit of scar tissue, but physically I don't notice that. You can just see that when I have pap smears. And then sex changed a lot for my husband and I, because then there wasn't that subtle fear of, oh, don't hit the wrong spot, or ecstasy, ooh, agony, hello, that came out of nowhere. Well, the mood's killed now. That changed a lot, which is a good thing. From a cramps and blood perspective, both uteri bleed at the same time. Both uteri contract and release their inner linings at the same time. That means that I have literally double, maybe more. I'm not sure whether the cysts have anything to do with the pain. But I literally have double the blood and double the pain. Double the blood means that I have indeed ended up in the hospital due to hemorrhage, because you can only lose so much blood before it takes a toll, if you're not regenerating it in a fast enough rate. And the pain has landed me in the hospital a couple of times because it is both organs contracting. Literally, your uterus contracts just like it does in childbirth to push the lining out, just like it does to guide the baby out of the organ. When you have both going at the same time, and now that I have been through childbirth, that is what it does. The difference for me is that in childbirth, they are in waves. If I haven't caught the pain on day 3 before it starts, then with medication, then it's like going straight from not having pain to the transition phase in childbirth with no warning. And there are no waves. It's just constant pain until it's decided it's released its lining enough. The pain can be intense, and I have had to have morphine and Demerol in the past in the emergency room when that particular month, for whatever reason, the pain is worse. I have to use oftentimes both a tampon and a pad because of the blood situation, usually on day 3, because it's too heavy to contain, and I will usually change that combo in the worst 5-hour period. I will change that combo 3 to 4 times an hour. Hence why sometimes I end up in the hospital with hemorrhaging. Okay, now that I have told you this whole story, what the hell does that have to do with the blue moon? Okay. Nothing with the blue moon in general, but I do not know if this has always been the case, okay, if this has always existed with me, or if we just noticed after I started spiritual changes and really started noticing the moon, okay? Excuse me. When I first started down the current spiritual path that I'm on now and found myself very interested in the moon and what was going on, a few months down the line, I didn't notice. My husband noticed that. And my husband told me, Raylana, did you know that you're getting your period on the full moon? And I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. And he's all, no, really, you're getting your period on the full moon. I'm noticing it. And he works nights, so he just notices the moon and what's going on in the sky because he works nights and he's outside a lot during work. And so he just, notices things like that. And because he's out there. And so I just thought that was an interesting quirk, and that just that particular month, that's when it landed. Well, it's been a couple years now where my period will happen on or within one day of, at first it was the full moon. And then I did notice I was ovulating, because I can tell when I'm ovulating, on the new moon. About 6 months into then I noticing this, it didn't go away, by the way. It stayed that way. Has not changed. About 6 months into noticing this, I skipped my period on the full moon. And I thought, well, am I pregnant? Which was interesting because I'm a faithful wife, and my husband has had a vasectomy. And I was like, well, that would definitely be a miracle baby, but I just, waited to see what would happen. And then I ended up getting my period on the new moon. And ever since then, so it's been about 1.5 years now, 2 years since I've noticed, I ovulate on the full moon, and I get my period on the new moon. I have no idea why this is. I do not know how my body attuned to this. I don't know if it always did and I just didn't notice. It never made a connection to me. I find that strange, and I would love to invite you, if you have any ideas on the significance of that, both my double womb and my synchronization with the lunar cycles. I would love a response on what you think that might symbolize or what you think that means. I have no idea. I think it's interesting. I think it is a reminder that I have a real connection to the feminine side of deity. And the moon symbolizes that for me, and so my body is responding in kind, perhaps. Don't know. Would love to hear your opinions on it. Okay, so that's it for now. You now know way more than you ever thought you would. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.